Hey guys, this is my level 100 Twisting Blades Rogue Guide that I'm planning on running when I get to Endgame. Alright, so starting with the helmet slot, we have the best helmet, actually the best item in the game, the Harlequin Crest. It gives you up to 20% damage reduction and 4 ranks to all skills. It's just a massive increase to your character's power. It's probably going to be super rare, so I'm going to give you a few other options. Option number 1 that I would probably run would be the Mangler's aspect. This makes it so you daze targets as you hit them when they're vulnerable, and you're going to be applying vulnerable to any monster that's affected by your poison trap as you damage them. You drop the poison trap down, you're dealing damage, there's a chance that they become vulnerable, and then once they're vulnerable, you continue to hit them, and then there's a chance for them to become dazed. Now, that sounds like a lot of chances, but you're going to be hitting so many times that chance is going to happen quite a bit. Any other options besides this? Shared Misery is pretty good if you're not picking this up elsewhere, which I'll recommend. Siphoning Victuals, we'll be picking this up as a substitute later for sure. And Enshrouding Aspect, I'm not completely sold on. With how often Dark Shroud can get taken off of you on trash monsters, which I'll go over a few different ways that you can prevent this. But I'm not too sure how strong this will be in, general trash monster fights with how often they're fighting or they're attacking you. You're just getting hit so many times. They just have so many chances to take off your Dark Shroud that this may just disappear and you're going to be spiking your damage reduction. Moving on to the chest armor slot, we have the aspect of Disobedience. I think this is kind of a no-brainer. It's an easy pickup. You can boost your armor by up to 50%, which we're going to be doing very easy with how fast we attack. This stacks insanely fast with Twisting Blades and the Blade Dancers aspect. You're just going to be cleaving everything, even on single target bosses. The stack's really high. I think it even caps out all the time on bosses. But yeah, this just boosts your armor by so much, and it's so easy to pick up because you can just go out, do the dungeon, unlock the aspect for your codex, and you have it forever. For the gloves, I'm running the Blast Trappers aspect. This is how we're going to apply vulnerable to whatever we're attacking. You drop your poison trap down. Any enemy inside the poison trap or affected by it, you deal damage to, and they have a chance to become vulnerable. This should be up all the time with how fast we're attacking. And if you wanted to run a more defensive approach, you can move this over for like a ring slot and pick up either Shared Misery or the Mangler's aspect. So you could run Shared Misery in your helmet and Manglers in your gloves, and then you would just be crowd controlling the entire pack as you're attacking, just passively. But for now, I'm just going to stick with the Blast Trappers aspect and a little bit more damage or resource, but you kind of got to go with the flow with whatever you get as you're building your character. Moving on to our pants slot, we have the second unique item that we're chasing down, the Temerity Pants. I think these are going to be really nice for Rogue because they effectively increase your maximum HP to 180%. And that's nice so that we don't get, one shot. At least it's less often. How we're going to stack it up to 80% is with our Siphoning Strikes. We'll just be attacking all the time, and as long as we don't take a big hit, it'll just overcap all the way up to the 80%, and then when we do take a big hit, we have a larger health pool, which helps us survive. So I think that's going to be really nice for Rogue with how squishy it's sounding like Rogue is going to be at Endgame. A substitute, because, that's a unique item, it's going to be hard to find, would be the Siphon Victuals. And I think this is going to be a good replacement because this also relates to healing. I did try this on the open beta against the Shava, and the amount of health potions that you can get from this is crazy. They're just everywhere as you're attacking. This is a really strong legendary, so if you have all those health potions on the ground, you can just freely spam them, which somewhat recreates this. You don't have the massive health pool, but I think this is going to be a good secondary option. For our boot slot, we're picking up the double Shadow Step legendary because we did drop dash out of the build for Endgame, which I'll talk about later when we're talking about our skill tree and how I adjusted that. But without dash, we need more mobility, and this gives us the second charge of Shadow Step, so we can continuously jump from one side of the pack to the other, which is a big part of Twisting Blades and the Blade Dancers aspect. The farther away that they return to you, the more damage they deal. I'll talk about different options for this with dash a little bit later. All right, so moving on to the two-handed weapon, we have Accelerating Aspect. Previously, I was always running Blade Dancers aspect here, and I'll still run that as I'm leveling up and progressing, but at the end of the day, I really want to run Accelerating Aspect here because attack speed affects everything. So this is just a raw increase in your damage to whatever you're doing. It's going to feel really good to have more and more attack speed. And attack speed for this build scales multiple different things, not just your damage, which I think does almost as equal as Blade Dancers. But the other two things that it scales is your cooldown reduction, because more attacks means more cooldown from your Twisting Blades, and your Siphoning Strikes is off of each hit. Doesn't matter the damage that you're dealing, it's off of how many times you can critically strike a close enemy. So more hits means more health, and also more cooldown reduction, which lets you keep Dark Shroud up, lets you be more mobile because you can Shadow Step more often. This is more damage because you can get Shadow Clone back, or Poison Trap uptime. You can drop this and make sure that everything is affected by it. And Poison Imbuement is just obviously more damage. So moving over to the right side, starting with the Amulet, this unique could be really good if it works the way that I think it might. The 30% more resource in general is just nice. There's no question about that. But it's supposed to take your energy away instead of, when you take damage, it's supposed to take the energy away. But if you have Inner Sight active, that's supposed to keep you capped out on your energy. So what happens when you take damage while Inner Sight's active? This could just negate damage while you're in Inner Sight, and that could just be completely broken. If that's not how this works, I'm definitely not going to be running this, and I'll swap my Blade Dancers aspect up to here, and then I'd pick up, Smiting aspect or Inner Calm, just another different damage aspect. So for the first ring, we have the Edge Masters aspect, which is really strong for this build because we're running Inner Sight, and when that's active, we're capped out on our, energy. So this is just all the time, almost 20% increased damage. I wouldn't switch this out with anything. You can reorganize things, but you're gonna be running the Edge Masters aspect somewhere in this build. So moving on to our second ring, we have the Assimilation aspect. This will give you 5 to 10 energy whenever you dodge an attack. This will also give you 8% increased dodge chance versus enemies affected by your damage over time, and everything's going to be affected by our poison because Poison Trap and Poison Imbuement. So this is going to be up on anything that you're attacking, and you're just going to be getting so much energy from it. I think it's going to be really nice. So moving on to our two weapons. The first one, we have the Blade Dancers aspect. The no-brainer, this has to be in the build if you're running Twisting Blades. And we have our last unique item that we're chasing down. This will give you another boost to attack speed, and we already talked about how powerful attack speed is for this build, and even more of it is just that much better. Because it's a unique item, it's going to be, hard to get. It's going to be very rare. So my second pick would probably be the Inner Calm for damage. This will stack up to 30% increased damage when you're not moving. And you might be thinking that you have to move all the time, but a little fun fact for that aspect is you can Shadow Step, and that doesn't count as moving. So you can engage the fight, you're attacking, and Shadow Step to the other side of the pack, and you don't lose your stacks. So that's a very nice little 30% increased damage. It's just not as nice as some of the other ones. A defensive / offensive approach would be the smiting aspect. So this will give you 40% increased crowd control duration, and the critical strike chance is nice, but it's only while they're injured. We're really not going to be using this for that. It is just a slight damage increase, but you're mainly using this for more crowd control duration. So the longer the enemy's crowd controlled, the longer they're not doing damage to you. All right, so now for the gems. In our weapon, we're going to be picking up the Emerald. More crit damage against vulnerable enemies. Everything we're attacking is going to be vulnerable. It's just more crit damage, and crit damage scales really well. In our armor, we're going to be running Ruby to increase our maximum life. Rogues, need damage reduction, and more life makes siphoning strikes heal more. Another option would be Topaz. If you find yourself getting comboed, stun locked and just killed, I would give this a try, but without actually playing those harder, nightmare dungeons. I don't know how often that's going to be. We do have Shadow Step, which we can actually get out of those scenarios as well, but it'll be between Ruby and Topaz. I'm going to start with Ruby, and I can switch to Topaz if that becomes an issue. And then for our jewelry, we can pick up the skull gems for more armor, or the diamond gems for just resistance to all. You could, depending on what you're fighting, during the betas, the main boss was a Shava, and everybody knew a Shava did poison damage. So you can lean into one stat if the boss that you're going after does shadow damage, and you really want to min-max for that boss. You can't get past it without reducing that damage. You can do that, but in general, it's going to be between the skull gems and the diamond gems, depending on you need physical damage reduction or do you need resist all. All right, so now that we're doing an endgame build, this build is geared towards more difficult, challenging content that you don't need to be fast. You don't need to go from point to point. You're not trying to speed run these dungeons. You're going to be fighting in, a single spot or a single area for a while, and things aren't just going to die immediately. So we're taking all of our movement speed away, and we're dropping our dash, and we're picking up Shadow Clone and some defensives and a little bit of offense with these 2 poison points. The third point in Poison Trap lets us reset the cooldown on our poison imbuement every once in a while, and we might as well lean a little bit more into our poison imbuement. So we pick up this 3rd point, and that'll just make poison imbuement do more damage, which is nice for single target. We're also picking up Agile for our, overall defense. We're going to be leaning into as much dodge chance as we can. Being a rogue, we can get this pretty high, anywhere from 35 to 45% chance, depending on how strong the diminishing returns are. If you want to, or actually if you need to, for dungeons, if you find that bosses aren't the issue and it's the getting to the bosses, the trash mobs, they're just annoying, they're harder to kill, or because they're hitting so many different times, you're taking so much damage, poison imbuement isn't absolutely necessary. And it's, like I said, this is the single target option. If you wanted a more trash killing oriented or control option, or damage on trash and a little bit of CC, I would take these 4 points away, and I'd pick up cold imbuement with frigid finesse. So just 1 point in cold imbuement is all you need. We're not really trying to lean into this too hard. This is an easy, just 4 point swap. So you can pop your cold imbuement And fun fact about twisting blades with the Blade Dancer's aspect, they apply the imbuement on the entire attack. So when you attack and on the return and while they're spinning around, they hit 2 more times. So you're applying this in a sweeping motion as they're rotating around and as you're dashing. So you can apply a cold imbuement to the entire pack without a problem. And with how many times that it hits, you're going to be freezing very often as well, because 25% chill per hit. Each Twisting Blades attack you actually deal is 4 hits. So you're getting 8 hits every time you activate this. So you're going to be freezing things a lot, and when they're frozen, they're not hitting you, so that's defense. You're controlling them, and then when they are chilled, you're going to be dealing 15% multiplicative increased damage, and if they're frozen, you're dealing 30% increased damage. So in general, I think this is going to be the go-to if you're dealing with problems with the trash packs and just getting to the boss, because our build does do well on bosses, so we may not need to lean more into that. But if bosses are, the challenging part of the dungeon, stick with the poison imbuement and you should be just fine. So here's a quick little mid-game, pre-bis, end-game rogue. When you don't have all of your uniques and stuff. I kind of talked about what you could switch out, but this is something realistic that you can aim for. I've tried to make as many of these aspects available in the codex that you can just grab. So I'll quickly run through this and explain why this kind of works or how this works. So starting off, we have the cheats aspect, and this makes it so when you crowd control an enemy, they deal 25% reduced damage to you. Now you might be saying, well, if they're crowd controlled, then they're not hitting you at all. Well, slows are also a crowd control, and we apply our slow with our dash. So you dash through and it applies a slow for 3 seconds, which gets extended by our smiting aspect by up to 40%. So everything you're going to try to slow, and when they're slowed, they're going to deal 25% reduced damage. And when they do damage you, you get movement speed. But the main thing here is, the defense from the less damage taken. The, disobedience is an easy pickup. We were running this before. I talked about the Mangler's aspect. This, just applies daze to everything as you're attacking. Like I said, we talked about this before. We also talked about the Siphon Victuals. This is an easy pickup. For the Codex, Shared Misery. As we're doing all these little micro CCs and you're dashing through, you might have missed a few things as you're dealing damage. This will just spread any crowd control you have out to nearby monsters. So this will be really nice to just kind of, this whole thing just synergizes well. We obviously have the Blade Dancer's aspect and the accelerating aspect. These two, I would actually aim for, like I talked about, I would put the accelerating aspect over here and the Blade Dancer's aspect on this side. But these can go back and forth depending on what you get, because, this is a codex option and this is not. So you might have an awkward period where, you don't have one of these for a while and you already have things rolling, and it's just how it's going to be. But either of these in any position will work just fine. The Umbral aspect you can pick up on the Codex. This will just give you some primary resource because we are doing all these little micro CCs. You should be getting a ton of energy. We talked about the Blast Trappers aspect. This is how we're going to apply Vulnerable. The Edge Masters we talked about. Very powerful offensive aspect. We'll be able to get this in the Codex as well. And the Smiting aspect, if you can get this, it's not available in the Codex, but this will make all those crowd controls last a little bit longer. And that's just going to be really nice for our defense and just general survivability in this pre-bis end game trying to push, rogue build. So this is how I'd set up my skill tree for this pre-bis, mid-end game rogue build. We are picking up our dash. We are dropping our poison imbuement. We don't actually need the poison imbuement because we apply all the poison that we need from the poison trap. And because we're not running poison imbuement, we're not going to pick up our countering poison trap. So the idea that we talked about, dash applies to slow, and when enemies are slow, they deal less damage. And we're also going to pick up trick attacks. So when you critically strike a dazed enemy, they'll be knocked down for half a second. The duration of the knockdown isn't important. It's mainly to activate this. Whenever you knock down an enemy, you gain 15% increased crit chance for 3 seconds. So this is just a nice little easy pickup because we had an extra point. But other than that, everything else is pretty standard. So now for the Paragon board. These, without really diving into the game and having experience with it, can be, pretty hard to deal with. I haven't played the Endgame. I'm not saying that this board is perfect. It's definitely not. For all I know, this board might not even be good. I guess you guys can be the judge of that. I'm going to try to work my way through it and kind of explain why I took the way that I did through here and why I chose which boards and why I chose which glyphs. But yeah, just keep in mind there's countless number of options that you can choose and different orders and different ways that you can approach this. This is just how I decided to approach the Paragon board for my build at this time without playing the Endgame. So another little disclaimer before we really dive into the Paragon board is glyphs. These aren't going to be super easy and simple and quick to get. You're not going to have rare glyphs very early on. It's sounding like it's going to come much later, and then when you do, you still have to level them up. So these aren't going to be as powerful starting off, in the range that they cover isn't going to be that big. So the increase in damage from the glyphs, you have to get the correct one. You just can't bank on that happening. I'm still most likely going to path through or past the glyph areas so I can tie into them later without spending a bunch of respec gold. And so yeah, I'll just path past it and I can just come back later when I get the glyph that I'm looking for, slot it in, fill out a few nodes, and then, move on. So starting off with the starter board, first thing to know is the glyph that you choose to put in here really should be a dexterity glyph, with how much dexterity is in this board compared to the other stats. It's just a massive difference. I definitely recommend whatever glyphs you choose, it should be a dexterity glyph to start off. And how I progress through this board is I went to the right here to pick up this little set of damage increasing nodes, and I came up, went into the glyph, and spent any points I needed to pick up as much dexterity as I could. And I went first through the left side to pick up damage and then worked my way out the board. This is very easy to swap out. Everybody's leaning into damage, and from what I've heard, rogues need almost as much defense as we can get. We'll have to kind of feel that out, but this is a very easy, like 4 to whatever, 4 or 5 point swap to go from the damage side to more resistance, if this helps you. So for my second board, I chose the exploit weakness board. This is a very good intelligence board. It's actually tied for the most. So I would recommend an intelligence glyph in this board. I'm really just pathing straight through to the glyph and then out. There is some vulnerable damage nearby. This potion healing isn't very strong. I'm just pathing over here to pick up some intelligence. But very close, you have damage to elites with some movement speed. And then towards the top, you have vulnerable damage. Both of these are very, close and strong pickups to our main path. So in general, this is just a quick and easy board that we can just get in and out of. Just like the other boards, if I don't have the glyph, I'll just path right on through and on to the next board. So for my third board, I'm choosing the Leyrana's Instinct board, and this is the other board that's tied for the most amount of intelligence around the glyph. So I recommend putting an intelligence glyph in here. I'm choosing the combat glyph. but this is also the first and only board that I'm going to choose to pick the legendary node up. This board is why dodge chance has more utility than just damage reduction. This node right here is actually a lot stronger than what you might think. I did some calculating over some footage from the previous betas, and when I was fighting a Shava, the inner sight cycle time was around 5 seconds, which is really fast. So every 5 seconds, you have 1.5 seconds of 100% dodge chance. That's very strong for defense. And then on top of that, just from that, you can pick up these nodes here, which make it so you deal more damage after you dodge an attack. And the word on the street going around is this is in its own damage bucket. Whether that's true or not doesn't really matter to me. If it's not, and it just gets added to other damage increases, it's still a very strong damage increase that, depending on what X is, depending on how long this is up, this will be very strong. And you can pick this up in a couple different sections on this board, depending on if we want more damage. But yeah, this is just a really simple board. I came in, went through the glyph. I'm picking up the dodge damage increase. The center of the board gives us attack speed. And, like I talked about earlier, attack speed is very nice for this build. It's a very good increase in our damage. When we came down, we picked up the legendary node, and then we path out the board. Moving on to board number 4, I went with the Tricks of the Trade board. I just pathed up, went through the glyph, and pathed out, picking up the strength nodes, which this board is very good for strength. It's actually only the 3rd best for strength, but the other, rare nodes along this path are very strong. And, being 3rd best might not sound that strong, but it's only 3rd best by 1 breakpoint, which means, just 1 additional stack from this bonus. So that's not a big deal. And the key bonuses here, you have crit damage and physical damage, massive damage increase in this corner. We have armor. We need some defense. We'll most likely be picking up anything armor related here. We have some close by damage to close, but we also have damage reduction to close that we can pick up. So this is a good offensive and defensive, node category here. We have damage to elites. This is really nice to pick up. Nothing really else too important. And yep, then we just path up to the next board. So for my last board, I went with the Deadly Ambush board. I just pathed in and went straight to the glyph. Close to it are a couple good rare nodes. We have damage reduction from trapped enemies and damage increased to trapped enemies. So it's just a nice simple board that you can path in just to finish it out. I still have 42 points left over to spend, so now I'll go over where you can put those points to really fine-tune this and either gain more defense or more damage. So starting with this first board here, we have a couple defense pickups that we can take. Starting down at the bottom here, we have a bunch of resist all that we can come back down and grab. And like I talked about earlier, this is an easy, few points to pick up. And if we wanted to, we can drop these points and just reroute and head this way. And we can also pick up a couple armor nodes for more physical damage reduction. Moving on to the additional points for board number 2, we have some additional vulnerable damage here. And if we path even farther, we have damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. So we have a little bit of damage and damage reduction that we can path to fairly easily with our extra points. And coming down here, if we wanted to lean even more into elite damage, this is close by as well. All right, For board number 3, the extra points that we can pick up. The defensive options, we have some resistance to all on the left side over here, and some more resistance to all down here. And then the 2 damage pickups we have in the center here, we have a bunch of raw damage and attack speed. And then down here we have more damage after dodging and damage to elites. All right, the extra points for board number 4, we have some damage and damage reduction over here to close enemies. This would be a nice little efficient pickup because you have damage and resistance over here. We've got 2 armor nodes for defense, a pretty big source of crit damage and physical damage down there, and 1 point away damage to elites. All right, so for the final board, we have some more damage that we can pick up to enemies affected by our traps, and down here we have some damage reduction from enemies affected by your traps. And then if you really wanted as much armor as you could get, there's a little bit more armor on this side that you can path over to. All right, so now that I went through my board, some of you may have noticed and may be wondering why I didn't pick any legendary nodes or path over to them. I'm going to go through them and tell you what I think on them and if they're good and why I didn't path over to them. Starting with this one, it sounds good. It is a nice damage increase. We just didn't path over to it because this side of the board is just easy in and out. We're going to pick up the glyph. In general, the glyph is stronger. People are trying to make the case that early on you should just not path towards glyphs and you should just pick up legendary nodes, because the glyphs you probably won't have for a little bit, and once you have the glyphs, they're going to be the magic quality, so they're not going to be that high of a level. That's all true, but I don't really want to respec my entire board. I mean, if I path over to here and then path out, or I'd have to recreate this entire board, or I can just path through it, and just skip a little bit of damage, and I'm still getting these other, big damage increases along the way. Moving on to this next one, I did choose this one. We talked about this a little bit. Mathematically, when you're doing maximum damage, you're just, target dummy practice on a boss, which happened all the time on, say, a Shava. You're just spamming your attacks, following it around. This ends up being a 30% uptime on 100% dodge chance. So 30% of the time, you're just immune to, things hitting you. So that defensive is just massive. And on top of that, you have some good nodes close by that, you can easily pick up along the way. Moving on to this one. We don't use any marksman skills, so this is just not going to get used for this build. And for Deadly Ambush, you can definitely come and pick this up early on. You get to the end. Crit damage early on is going to be nice, but later, because of this guy right here, core skills deal more critical strike damage. This scales up massively. This ends up being like a 19% increase that stacks up, and the maximum that this stacks up to, let me look at this a second, it goes up to 172% critical strike damage. So the amount of critical strike damage that you end up endgame is going to be massive, and 20% more from this isn't going to be a big deal, but if you want to, feel free to grab this. Like I said, especially early, I think it's going to be worth it. Let's look at a few of these that I didn't choose. This one could be good. It's good for trash. If trash ends up being the main problem, at least for this build, it could be good. There is a few other things. This whole board is built for dealing with trash monsters, and I just didn't want to lean into that. I wanted kind of an overall, good board with just raw damage or damage reduction. We're not using combo points, so this one's irrelevant. This one is just not good. We are using imbuement skills, but increasing our poison damage. The poison damage we're doing is such a small amount of our damage, and increasing our poison resist just in general, I don't think this is a good legendary node. And then this one could be good. You can try this one, but at the end of the day, it's got the same problem the rest of the legendary nodes have. It's just too far out of the way. You know, glyphs are kind of king at the end of the day, and you know, in the end game. So you're not going to take the glyph and path all the way over here for not that big of a damage increase. All right, so now I'm gonna go over my glyphs and tell you why I chose what I did. Starting with the chip glyph, I chose this one because it's a dexterity glyph, and I went first with this because it's just the best dexterity glyph that you can get. It's very high damage increase, and it's just going to be nice to have right away. But like I said, we have to start with the dexterity glyph, and that one is my favorite. The next glyph that we choose would be the tracker glyph. Another nice damage increase, and makes the poisons last longer, 33% longer, which is nice for more damage, but we really aren't doing that much poison damage compared to how much physical damage we're doing. The main benefit of that is to keep the enemy poisoned and keep as many enemies poisoned as we can, because when they're poisoned, they deal less damage to us, and for every poisoned enemy, we have 1% increased attack speed up to 15%. So the longer a poison lasts, the easier it is to poison multiple enemies. The next glyph, the combat glyph. This is a huge damage increase later in the game. You know, we're going to have a good chunk of crit chance, and this scales up to 170 something percent crit damage. That's an insane damage increase. All of these have been in their own damage bucket so far, which is very important. So they multiply with each other. They don't just, you know, increase additively with each other. They're going to all multiply with each other, and crit damage is going to be one of the best ways to do that. Stacking your crit damage this high, I don't know of any other place, at least for Rogue, that you can get this much crit damage from one source. The bonus here is kind of irrelevant, but the crit damage you get from the first bonus is going to be massive. Moving on, we have the exploit glyph. This one's also going to be very nice. Vulnerable damage, it's also in a separate bucket from the first 3, so it's going to multiply, very important. And it's just going to apply vulnerable to things when they damage you. So our main way of applying vulnerable is going to be from our poison trap. We put that down, and then we deal damage to enemies affected by our poison trap, which has a chance to apply or make them vulnerable. Well, this gives you a really big head start on that. When you engage enemies or a group of monsters, they're going to attack you. When they hit you, they just become vulnerable for 3 seconds. So right away when you engage, you can just immediately apply vulnerable. And after those 3 seconds, you've already put your poison trap down, and you can just, you know, continuously keep that applying. But this just helps you apply that vulnerable immediately. And on top of that, just scales the vulnerable damage even higher, which is really nice. And the last one that we chose, this is in the same damage bucket as one of our previous glyphs, but I'm still going to choose this one. It's still a strong damage increase. It's a dexterity glyph, so you know, that's why I chose this board. But the additional bonus is also really nice, a damage reduction, so we're always going to be wielding a melee weapon. We'll never have our bow out, so this is just a flat 10% damage reduction, and this is going to be my final glyph. You can also instead choose the turf glyph. It's very close to the same thing. It's just damage to close enemies isn't as big as just all the time. So that's why I prefer the closer glyph. One thing to keep in mind when you're, you know, maybe making your own Paragon board is the bonuses on rare nodes. The requirements on them increase by, I think it's 90 points every additional board that you add. So the farther in the board you are, the higher the requirements are. And when you get far enough in the board, if it's not your main stat, there's a very high chance that you're not going to be able to reach that bonus. So the order of which you take these boards does matter. I chose this board second because I want this bonus. And if it's anywhere past the second and maybe the third board, I could still get it. I'm not going to get this bonus. So I knew I could get the bonus right now. So I put it in here. And then the third board, I wanted these bonuses for sure. I should be able to get to the 360 intelligence for this one. Like I said, the 350 strength is going to be close, but maybe we can still get that. The dexterity is no problem. The 350 intelligence we should be able to get to. Another 350 intelligence. Dexterity is also no problem there. We're not going to pick that up. But the from here on, anything like this, 430 strength, you know, I don't know how much main stat or, you know, these secondary stats we're going to be working with, but I can't see how we're going to gain this much strength to get this bonus. So I organized these boards in order of, you know, important ones. This board kind of being my favorite board, and I'm picking up as many rare nodes as I can because they're so good. And then, you know, starting with this one because it is a strength node, and I wanted to be able to make sure that I picked this up. But coming into here, and then especially once you get to this fifth board of mine, you know, 530 strength. I don't think I'm ever getting that one. 540 intelligence. I don't think I'm getting that one. You know, and anything that deals with willpower, I don't even know if there is anything on here. You're definitely not going to be getting that. It doesn't even look like there is a willpower bonuses anywhere. But anybody that's really just pathing straight through, you know, I have 4 additional boards. You know, you look at this fifth board, 620 strength, 620 intelligence. So now you're definitely, you know, I'm at 500 dexterity. Sure, I could get to the 600, maybe the 700 dexterity, but now you're really leaving those dexterity nodes to last if you want even a chance to get the bonuses. So just keep that in mind. The order of which you place your boards and go through them does matter, and you can't always plan on being able to get all of the bonuses from every rare node that you go through. So that's what I'm planning on running when I get to Endgame. I guess we'll have to see when the game comes out, you know, how I'm progressing through the campaign and, you know, what else I learn. But I'm really excited. If you want to see how my build's progressing as we go through, or how I'm adjusting it, then stop by my stream, say hi, you know, ask any questions. If you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to see more in the future. Catch you guys next time.